In my first year of university, I read through the whole Bible, highlighting every passage I could find that talked about prayer. Yeah, I know, I was one of the cool kids. It's hard to be humble about that. I really did, though. Over a couple of months, I went through the whole Bible, highlighters in hand, marking up every text about prayer. One of my friends was convinced that daily devotions were an essential part of faith. 20 or 30 minutes of prayer and Bible study every single day. That's what good Christians did. That had never really worked for me, and so I was looking for an excuse to stop. And I thought that if I could prove that the Bible never explicitly commanded that kind of daily devotions, that would help me win the argument. And that is what the Bible is all about, right? Winning arguments. But the other part of my research was genuine curiosity about how prayer works. I've told the story here before about my aunt's struggle with brain cancer. The first time she got cancer, when I was 8, we prayed for healing, along with everyone that we knew. And through some skilled medical treatment, and what seemed to us to be a verifiable miracle, the tumor just disappeared, an answer to prayer. But then, when I was a teenager, a decade later, her cancer came back. And again, everyone we knew prayed for my aunt, asking for God to heal her again. This time there was no healing. The tumor kept on growing, making her sick, changing her personality, taking her mobility, and eventually it killed her. We prayed, but this time God didn't answer our prayers. And there were a ton of explanations offered for why that was, why these things happen, but nothing was satisfying to me. So I dove into the Bible looking for answers. I wanted to know how it all worked, really. Prayer, the Bible, church history, theology. I was trying to understand faith, to take it apart and then put it back together in a way that made sense to me. By then, I was seriously considering making the church my profession, and if I was going to commit to being a pastor, then I wanted to know how faith works. So I read through the Bible with highlighters, marking up passages about prayer. I took elective university courses in biblical literature and world religions. I read books with titles that would have made my high school Bible teachers blush. A New Kind of Christian, The Orthodox Heretic, Why Christianity Must Change or Die. And eventually, I went to seminary to study systematic theology, biblical languages, textual criticism, and church history. I fell asleep in more than a few of those classes, not really that much of a nerd, but in the end they gave me a degree, declaring me a Master of Divinity. Hold your applause. I have not yet figured out exactly how prayer works, by the way. I have found that every answer I get leads to more questions, more complications. And while that isn't what I was hoping for when I set out, this journey of questioning and trying to figure it all out has led me to all kinds of interesting places. In the language of spiral dynamics, those are the questions and methodology of the orange space. As you likely know by now, our summer series is on the model of spiral dynamics. This model explores how change works, how individuals, organizations, and societies grow and evolve over time. It's a combination of psychology, history, sociology, and philosophy. If you care to dig further into it, there is a ton of academic research behind it, and I would be glad to point you in that direction. If that data behind the model matters to you, if you have already done a Google search or two to figure out if any of this is legit, well then, welcome to Orange. This is probably home base for you. For a lot of folks, religious or otherwise, elementary and high school are about learning conventional wisdom. Basic math and science, the general story behind our country and our world, how to be a good citizen, how to be a decent human being. That is blue, might be presented in secular terms. This is what we expect of you. This is what makes for a good life in our society. Or it might come in religious terms. This is what God expects of you. This is what Jesus and the Bible say about life. And then Orange comes along, often in late teens or early 20s. As professors and friends and podcast philosophers lead us to question well, why? Why should I believe that? Why are things the way they are? What's not just the way that I'm supposed to live life, but what's the best, most effective way to live? Orange is sometimes called the TED Talk stage. Ideas worth sharing, information and research and profitability and cold, hard facts. The business world is filled with orange spaces as well. Research and development, reports and analysis, policies and best practices. Not that you have to be a scientist or intellectual to have orange as the center of gravity. These colors are about worldviews and attitudes and values. It's not about skill. When you lean towards science and technology and education and statistics, whether you understand those things fully or not, those are still orange spaces for you. And most of us are very familiar with orange. It tends to drive the conversation around the globe, especially as it tends to dominate the technology and academic and corporate worlds that set so much of our agenda these days. Orange has a lot of power in our world. And that makes orange the center of a whole lot of conflict. That's one of my favorite things about the spiral dynamic model, how it gives insight into the conflicts between people and groups. A couple of years ago, I got caught up in all the drama around Brexit. The experts were almost entirely on one side. Economically, politically, internationally, logistically, leaving the European Union would make the UK poorer and weaker, disadvantaged. That's what all the models projected. The data was undeniable. So investors were bailing, corporations were leaving, academics were planning to take their research somewhere else. The voices of Orange were convinced Brexit is a bad idea. But on the other side, you had the blue arguments. Sovereignty, independence. We're not European, we are English. That is our story. We will finally get rid of all those pesky regulations holding us back. We will be free of all the bureaucrats in Brussels. They don't have our best interest at heart. We will have our pride and our honor and the history of the British Empire. Those are facts. Those are the facts that really matter. You can't put a price on self-determination. England prevails. The choice was so obvious to both sides, and they still just railed at each other. They still do. They all want prosperity, peace, the good of England. They want to be in a just and good and peaceful society, but they still keep talking past each other because they have totally different visions for what that means. I don't think those are mutually exclusive values at all. Both blue and orange want the same kinds of things: peace, cooperation, stability, growth. But the ways that blue and orange tend to think about those things, the assumptions that they make, the stories that they tell about how to get those things are so different. And so blue and orange just keep talking past each other. They simply can't see how someone on the other side could possibly be an ally rather than an enemy. We see that happening all the time in religion as well. Blue says God created the heavens and the earth in 6 days. Orange points to the data showing the earth and life evolving over billions of years. Blue believes the Bible is the Word of God. It's holy. It's perfect. Orange gathers archaeological and textual evidence of the Bible being written and edited by humans over several centuries. Blue says God created 2 genders, 1 design for sexuality. Orange upholds examples of diversity in biology and anatomy, in genetics and anthropology. Blue says, if you don't agree with me, you're going to hell. Orange says, there's no hell, and even if there was, I would rather go there than be wherever it is that you're going to be. Those are gross oversimplifications, obviously. Still triggering to some of us. There are blue and orange arguments mixed in both sides of all of those positions. And there's more than a bit of purple and green and red at play as well. But you get the idea. Blue religion upholds truth and tradition, and orange religion, or orange anti-religion as it often is, orange holds up faith or facts and reason. And they both condemn the other as ignorant and unfaithful. And everyone watching says, "Oh my, we are so polarized. How will we ever get back together?" Polarization gets a lot of press these days. I think spiral dynamics points out that this isn't actually polarization. Blue and orange aren't opposite ends of a spectrum. They're actually operating in entirely different spaces. And so all of these conflicts feel like a zero-sum game. Compromise always feels like losing. You have to leave your home. You have to betray your deepest values. And even the most sincere attempts at reconciliation don't actually bring people together because they're moving, but even when they're moving along different paths. So I wonder, can we find ways to help blue not become orange, but become the best version of blue? Can we stop trying to drag blue into orange in the name of progress? Likewise, can we help the orange within us, the orange around us, can we help that orange to be the healthiest version of orange rather than trying to convert it back to blue? What would that look like, to let orange be orange and let blue be blue and find common ground in health? No, I'm asking. I don't know. I think that's a different, more helpful way of framing the conversation, though, than talking about polarization. You are right. I am probably in over my head with most of that today. I don't have any brilliant ideas on how to bring people, let alone giant institutions, to move together across these different levels. But I do find that spiral dynamics helps to explain why all of these arguments get so confusing and why compromise is so difficult. We're rarely talking about the same things. And I think that the seeds of reconciliation are present in the mantras that I've been repeating throughout this series. All of the colors are present in each of us in some way. And there is health and unhealth in each color. The spiral dynamics model does speculate on where things might be headed next. So tune into the series finale later in August to hear me talk about integration and the color yellow. Got weeks to figure out this whole thing out. Sure, I'll get it by then. In the meantime, a bit more about the orange spaces in our faith. One of my first experiences with systematic theology was in grade 1, memorizing catechisms. At my school, this meant a list of 50 questions and answers that we memorized, teaching us the basic universal truths of the Christian faith. Who made you? God made me. What else did God make? God made all things. Why did God make you and all things? God made me and all things for his glory. How can you glorify God? By loving him and doing what he commands. And so on. This felt great in grade 1. Every question has an answer. The path was clear and reassuring. Of course, that's a cheap and easy feeling when you're handed both the answers and the questions. We had a definite grasp on truth because any questions that pointed in a different direction were dismissed entirely. Faith was this closed system. Orange is the opposite of that. Orange developed because of that, in response to it. Orange recognizes that we don't have all the answers. And even more importantly, Orange doesn't put a limit on the questions. Because every answer that we get always comes with a handful of new questions, deeper questions. There's always more to learn. You can never get to the bottom of this. And while that's threatening to a lot of blue spaces, really that's what faith is. Not knowing everything and still choosing to continue down that path, hoping and trusting, walking. That makes faith stronger, not weaker. And that's exactly what Orange brings to the table. One of my favorite comedians/theologians is Pete Holmes. And Pete does this bit about how nothing in life really makes sense. Like, science tells us that everything is made of molecules. This pulpit is made of molecules, and I am made of molecules. And a lot of the same kinds of molecules are in the pulpit as are in me. In fact, at the atomic level, while I've been up here talking, some of the molecules in the pulpit have traded places with the molecules in me. We are sharing atoms with everything around us all the time. That's what science says. Do you understand that? I don't understand that. But yeah, sure. We all know everything's made of molecules. Got it. Further, molecules are made almost entirely of empty space. There is very actual matter within a molecule. But when I put the molecules in my hand against the molecules of this pulpit, it stops, obviously. But when we ask science why these mostly empty molecules don't just go through each other, you know what the answer is? We don't know. That doesn't make any sense. It's a lot funnier when Pete does it, but he uses some words that I'm not allowed to say in church. And he's right. The world around us doesn't make sense. Before there was orange, that was a really scary thing. The other colors on the spiral are very stressed out by the uncertainty of the world. Purple cowers at it. Red rages against it. Blue tries to ignore it. Well, let's talk about what we do know and pretend that other stuff doesn't exist. But orange embraces the uncertainty. Orange sees an invitation to explore and grow. Orange is filled with curiosity and wonder, and that is a gift. All of the facts that we know came from wonder. All of our observations, all of our models of reality came out of wonder and curiosity, and they all invite more wonder and curiosity. That is awesome. That is divinity. Take it from me, I'm a master. Orange is not the enemy of faith. Orange expands faith. It grounds us, it roots out the inconsistencies and exposes the flaws. It makes what we do know and believe more practical and effective and honest. And at the same time, it pushes us beyond what we already know towards the greater mystery of the universe. That pursuit is what spirituality is all about. Faith is not having all the answers handed to us in a nice, neat package. Faith is about choosing to trust when the package that we're handed goes far beyond what we can understand. Ask, and you shall be answered. Knock, and the door will be opened. Seek, and ye shall find. That's where orange lives. Now, as with all the other colors, orange runs into trouble when it starts to see itself as the only valid space, the only way of knowing and seeing the world. Rob Bell and his son Trace talk about this in their podcast conversation, Me, We, and Everybody.
Which is great. It's fantastic. We're all the beneficiaries of this. But the problem is orange, rational, in unhealth, tends to narrow its filter of what we know down to very narrow parameters.
Yeah.
So it when you ask how do we know what we know, it generally locates knowledge in the mind.
Yeah.
Can you prove it? Do you have the data? It often can easily, in unhealth, get disconnected from body.
Yep.
Which is why you can see the return to yoga, especially in Western culture, or the discovery of yoga and the integration of body-mind. You can see why that would happen because orange, which has been working on us for about 400 years, let's say, as a center of gravity, inevitably can get you locked up in your head, disconnected from body, disconnected from earth, and what we know gets reduced to a very narrow filter of some version of scientific method. Mm-hmm. And so often what happens is the person, when they move into rational, leaves that old religious upbringing behind. Mm-hmm. The baby gets thrown out with the bathwater. And if you double down on that, orange and unhealth can leave you really empty at some point without any transcendence, without the magic.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Yeah.
That year that I read through the Bible looking for the answers for how prayer works, that was my first year of university. I spent so much time in my head taking calculus, intro to philosophy, intro to world religion, intro to history 1 and 2, biblical theology, English literature, all of that stuff. I loved it. Being in a university classroom, that's my jam. At the same time, it was one of the most miserable years of my life. Because while I was filling my head with information and logic, that's all I was doing. I stayed in my room on my computer, didn't exercise, I didn't eat well. Social anxiety kept me from engaging life on campus. I disconnected from my hometown friends, and I struggled to make new ones. I was living entirely in my head. I loved all the books and lectures and ideas, but expanding my mind was not enough, and I fell into depression. I went through something similar during seminary when again I got stuck in my head. I remember telling a friend, well, yeah, my body just basically exists to take my head from one place to another and get my head to class. I was observing and analyzing everything. I was thinking about life rather than living it. I didn't have words for it at the time, but those were very orange experiences. We read earlier from the book of Proverbs, "Incline your ear to wisdom and take her truth into your heart. Dig for insight as you would for buried treasure." That's the impulse of orange, to search and dig for knowledge and understanding. And the teacher of Proverbs nicely mixes that with blue religion, naming God as the source of all wisdom. And the poem goes on, "When you do that work of searching for wisdom, only then will you have an understanding of rightness, justice, and fairness, roads that lead to happiness. When wisdom enters your heart and knowledge delights you, good judgment will protect you and understanding will guard you. She will protect you from the way of evil, from lying and debauched people, from people who have abandoned honesty to roam paths of darkness. This way you will walk the roads of good people and stay on the paths of the just. My children, don't ever forget these lessons. Keep these principles in your heart. They'll bring you lengths of days, years of life, and above all, peace and prosperity. Never let love and faithfulness abandon you. Wear them like a necklace around your neck. Inscribe them on the tablet of your heart. Then you'll enjoy kindness and a good reputation from both God and people." That's the balance that I was missing in university and seminary. Orange is a path to life. It's not life itself. All the data and research and best practices, they lead somewhere. They serve a larger purpose. The pursuit of understanding, the wonder is amazing, and it's meant to bring us to happiness, peace, and prosperity, love and faithfulness, kindness and good reputation, God and people, the fullness of life. This kind of wisdom doesn't just live up here. Proverbs locates this wisdom in the heart. I've offered a lot of anecdotal evidence this morning, but if you care to do the research, I think you'll find the data backs it up. And if not, I'm sure that you will learn something interesting as you figure out why I'm wrong. So, may you feel wisdom's call as you walk among the molecules of this infinite expanding space in which we find ourselves. May orange take its place in the rainbow spiral within and around you. And may Creator God fill your minds and hearts and bodies and spirits with wonder this day and every day. Amen.